Alright, so last week we talked about typography and the aesthetic aspects of type, so things like how to match up fonts, how to pair fonts, how to create an order of importance or hierarchy by using contrast. So this week, now that we've got a sense of the design concepts, we're going to try and apply some of the technical aspects to type. So there are a lot of limitations to web type. Believe it or not, even though the internet seems infinite in its powers, we have a reduced selection of fonts. So not every font that we want to use is available to us necessarily. There's also no hyphenation, kinda. There's no kerning, or poor kerning at least, for the most part. And we have no real control over screen size, resolution, etc. So before we get too far, I want to explain a technical term, which is kerning. And for those of you that don't know what kerning is, it's adjusting the physical space between individual pairs of letters. So if we look at the word wasp up at the top there, we can see that the space between the W and the A is quite large compared to the space between the A and the S, and certainly between the S and the P. The example below shows a much better kerned set of type. So we've manually gone in and adjusted the space between each individual pair of letters to try and create some consistency. We can kind of liken it to putting a balloon between each pair of letters and putting the exact same amount of air into each balloon. If it fills all those spaces equally, then we've got a nicely kerned set of text. Now, this is important because when the kerning is off, the computer doesn't know what we're trying to spell, and it has a hard time at times of making those spaces even. Now, there's lots of defaults put into place to try and improve this, but the computer is never as good as we are by default. When we write things out by hand, we inherently put the kerning into place as we write letter by letter. It's just built in, and it makes sense to us. It looks right when we're finished. If we do it wrong, we end up with something like this: 10 flickering lights. A little bit of kerning could have gone a long way to making this purchase a lot more effective. So kerning is important because it's one thing that we really have no control over whatsoever on the web. It wasn't on the list there, but it's certainly something that we need to be aware of. Now, when I talk about limitations of the web and limitations of type, when I said that we only have so many fonts to choose from, I meant it. These are your choices, all 9 of them. And if we look through that list very quickly, we can see that Courier New, Comic Sans, Impact, they kind of all have a certain place and time for use. So we're really even more limited because we probably don't want to set an entire website in Comic Sans or Courier. Now, even though we only have 9 fonts available to us, there are actually a lot of alternatives. We have things like image replacement, @FontFace, Cipher, Kufon, and things like Google Web Fonts, Typekit, FontDeck, Font Bureau, and more. So image replacement is exactly what it sounds like. Where there used to be text, we replace it with an image, which gives us all kinds of benefits. One, any font that we have access to, we can totally use it. Load it up in Photoshop, style it, we can add all kinds of cool effects to our text, and on top of everything, we can kern our text. The downside is that text is no longer really readable by things like screen readers and search engines because it's a big image. It also means that our users can't highlight it and copy text for, I don't know, say they wanted to post something to Facebook or tweet about our site. They're no longer able to do that with ease. Another option is the @FontFace. It's a set of rules that we put into our CSS, or cascading style sheet. The downside here is that any font that you use, you need a license to use it on the web, and a lot of fonts simply aren't licensed for the web. You have to host it locally, which means that wherever your website sits, so does your font, which means you need more storage space. It also means that anyone who has a certain level of understanding of the web can also download that font off of your website and get it for free, when to get the license you most likely had to pay for it. And more significantly, browsers like Internet Explorer 6, 7, and 8 don't recognize the @font face property, and they won't be able to interpret those fonts. Another option is Cipher, or the Scalable Inman Font Replacement. It was created by Sean Inman, and it is a way to use Flash to replace your text. You still need a license for your font, but the plus side is it's accessible and it scales. The font can grow to any size you need it to be. The downside is that it's Flash. Flash is not well supported on a lot of devices. All iOS devices, so iPads and iPhones, have no Flash capabilities. And even Adobe, who created Flash, has said that all Android devices from here on out will no longer have support for Flash from Adobe. So it's not the best solution at this point in time. Kufon is native support, so it means that it's local. You don't need anything like Flash installed. It's fast and easy to set up and render, and it works in all major browsers. The downside is that the text isn't selectable, so your users can't highlight it to copy and paste it for their needs. And while that might seem like a good idea on the surface, it really is restrictive and frustrates a lot of users. The best solution, and one that's only been around for the last couple of years, is web fonts. So companies like Google and Typekit and Font Bureau and so on go and deal with the type companies directly and take care of the licenses, and all you have to do is sign up. Now, Google Web Fonts is free, but Typekit requires either advertising on your site for them, or you pay a nominal fee of about $50 a year to have unlimited access to the fonts. All of these services have limited selection. It's still not every font that exists. It uses a little bit of JavaScript to implement the font so that it's no longer downloadable by other users, which is simple to implement, but if someone has JavaScript turned off, it would fail. But for the most part, it's fairly robust and relatively easy to use, and of all the solutions, the most recommended. So now that we know what the limitations are, we should talk a bit about CSS. Now, I won't get into all the specific selectors available in CSS, but I will talk about CSS in general. This is what CSS looks like. Now, on the surface, it might look daunting or scary to you, but if you take a moment, you can quickly start to figure some things out. So the first line there says Mexican restaurant, and it's got a little curly brace. And at the end of this, there's another little curly brace. Think of those as the open and close tags. Just like in HTML, we have the greater than, less thans to open and close our tags. We have little curly braces here. So everything between those two little curly brackets belong to, in this case, the Mexican restaurant. We look at the second line. It says font dash size colon 16px semicolon. So there's two parts there. There's the rule and the value. So the rule seems fairly obvious. It's something to do with the size of the font. And on the other side of the colon, which separates the two properties, it says 16px. Px is short for pixels. So the font size in this case is 16 pixels. and we end that specific rule with a semicolon. The next line says that the font-family, or the font family, is Georgia. So something about a family of fonts is related to the font Georgia. There's a background image with a URL of margarita.jpg. So we know that the background image is a JPEG, and based off its name, it's probably of a margarita image, and the URL just means the location of that particular JPEG file. And the last line says the background-color is lime. So the background color for this Mexican restaurant, in this case, is lime. Now we might not know exactly where the Mexican restaurant is on the web page or how it fits, but we know that wherever it is or whatever it is, its font is 16 pixels in Georgia, that the background is lime with a picture of a margarita of some kind. So even though we've never seen CSS before, by quickly glancing at this, we can kind of get a good sense of things because it's a fairly straightforward language in a lot of ways. So let's take this knowledge and apply it to the next tutorial and start to really explore the different properties for text in CSS.